I'm Mary Starr with the Wake to Truth podcast. We're thrilled to have today as our special guest, Sheriff Richard Mack out of Arizona. He has been an author, a speaker. He spent 20 years as a county sheriff in Graham County, Arizona. Most importantly, he secured a very impactful victory at the Supreme Court. I'm going to let him talk about that in a moment.
Police academies all across this country never address the oath of office. Yet every single cop has to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Why don't we examine what the role of law enforcement, of sheriffs, of chiefs of police, what is our role in the protection of the American Republic, of our constitutional republic? The ultimate goal of all three branches of government, and we're the executive branch, we're the executors of the law, is to protect liberty. And if we have to do that against the FBI or the IRS or the EPA or the CDC or the USDA, then that's our job. Sheriffs, let's do our duty and protect the people from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, as we've promised to do, and save our country. We have the power. If the sheriffs of this country will just unite and be unified in keeping their oath of office and defending the American people against oppression and abuse of government, we could take back our country tomorrow.
In 2011, Sheriff Mack founded the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He has written a number of books, the most popular and bestseller of which is The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. Sheriff Mack, thank you for taking time to be with us today. I'd like you to launch into a couple of things first. I'd like to hear more about the Supreme Court decision that was so impactful, and also tell us a little bit about your book, your bestseller.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate being with you, Mary. It's an honor to be with you. I never take that for granted that there's people on podcasts and other media that want to talk to me about any current issues, but especially my Supreme Court victory, which was very historic in a lot of ways because no sheriff has ever sued the federal government and won at the Supreme Court, except this time. The time that I did it, I started the whole thing, and then 6 other sheriffs joined me in the lawsuit, including one from Texas. And he was from Valverde County or Del Rio, Texas. I think it was Valverde County in Del Rio, Texas. His name was J.R. Coog. He has since passed away. But 7 sheriffs nationwide out of 3,086 took on this battle against the Clinton administration. It was a real David versus Goliath story. And we were fighting for 2 things. One, we were fighting for the autonomy and sovereignty of the office of sheriff and the sovereignty of the states. We were also fighting for the Second Amendment. And the Brady Bill movement was trying to destroy the Second Amendment. And in fact, I filed against Brady Bill 1 February 28, 1994. 2 weeks later, Senator Howard Metzenbaum introduced Brady Bill 2, but, it never made it out of committee because Brady Bill 1 was still under litigation. In fact, it had just started. At that time, I was still by myself. Sheriff Prince joined the lawsuit about 4 or 5 weeks later, and then I think the next one after that was Sheriff Coog in Texas. And then people always ask, well, what was wrong with the Brady Bill? So first of all, it was gun control. That was the first thing wrong. Second, the federal government assumed that they could commandeer the office of sheriff for federal bidding, that we just would go along and enforce this for them without any negotiation or contractual agreement. And finally, the worst thing about the Brady Bill is that it threatened to arrest us if we failed to comply. Can you imagine? Wow. They threatened to arrest us. And this is a copy of the book. This book, I made this up, and it's all the best parts of this Supreme Court case. This is only $3. You can get 3 for $5. The more you get, the cheaper it is, obviously. Every American should get this book, and you should pass them around to local officials so that they know and understand that we already won a very unique and historic decision on the side of the 10th Amendment. And if there's any state that would be involved in something like that, it would be Texas, the state of independence. And we all should be, but Texas really lives that and believes that. And so this is the most powerful. Go ahead.
No, you finish, then I'll just interject something.
Well, this was the most historical state sovereignty and 10th Amendment decision in the history of America. And again, the only time this has ever happened with sheriffs in 250 years.
Well, I'm not surprised that Texas was the one that helped with this, because we do have a very independent spirit, a very independent nature. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were a republic before we joined the republic that is the United States of America.
Well, I actually call it a constitutional republic. I don't think the intent of the founding fathers was to call it a democratic republic. Naturally, a republic has some democratic things, but the real difference between a democracy and a republic is simply this: a democracy is mobocracy, and it becomes very dictatorial, just like it is now. And Ben Franklin said that a democracy is 3 wolves and a lamb voting what's for dinner. In a republic, the right of the individual comes into play. So the rights of the people are respected, but the sheriff and the state has to protect the rights of the individual, not the rights of the mob. And if the mob is trying to destroy the rights of the one, government must stand in the way and protect the individual rights of that person. That's the main
Couldn't agree
difference.
with you more. Could not agree with you more. That's 100% spot on. Thank you for that. I want to spend some time today talking about what your organization does. CSPOA focuses on several things. One is deportation, which from my perspective, that's extremely important in securing our border, is getting the people out that should never have been here in the first place. So I'd like you to speak to that initially.
Well, we have that in common. You're in a border state of Texas. I'm in a border state of Arizona. And I grew up here in Arizona, and I'm sure you grew up there in Texas, and you've seen it your whole life, and so have I. But what happened during the 4 years of the Biden administration has never happened before in the history of America. And that is just completely open the borders and allow anyone from Hamas, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda, any international terrorist group, any terrorist group from the Middle East, was allowed to infiltrate America, and they did. Cartels throughout Latin America, and especially Mexico, infiltrated America. The international exploitation of children, selling them into sexual trade warehouses, happened immensely during the Biden administration. I call it treason, what Biden and Kamala Harris did, and their entire administration and cabinet. They were all part of it. Alejandro Mayorkas was a traitor and a crook. Biden was a traitor and a crook. Kamala was a traitor and a crook, and they should all be prosecuted. I wish they would, even though I do believe that Joe Biden is not mentally capable of standing trial. The rest of them are and should be prosecuted. So the most important thing we can do now is make sure that those criminals that were allowed in by the Biden administration are removed, and the CSPOA is very active in trying to convince every sheriff in America to participate in that process. If it's going to be successful, that process must include the sheriffs, because they know their counties better than anybody else. Bureaucrats coming in to do this from Washington, D.C. or outside the state, they need to depend on local authorities to help them weed out which ones should be arrested and which ones should not. And so I think that's a vital way to keep it peaceful and very effective.
Totally agree with you on that. One of the things that I learned in looking into what's funding and fueling this, it's not immigration, it is mass invasion. It's not immigration. You don't have to go very
Yes.
far to find the globalist people very involved in this, the NGOs, the World Health Organization, the WHO, the UN, all of them are working together in collusion against America. And if you doubt it, there are many sources that we can cite. And I'm going to mention Michael Yon. He's one of the greatest at just totally exposing this. I've had him on my show a couple of times, and he's phenomenally well-informed and well-spoken. So if you doubt it, you follow him and see where he goes and see what he finds. He's spot on. But that's the root of the problem, and that's where the funding comes from. So in addition to letting the local sheriffs handle it, we need to get Washington on board with getting out of the UN and these other globalist organizations.
All for that. The United Nations is an enemy to America. WHO is an enemy to America. And I really appreciate President Trump, probably more than any other president ever since the United Nations and League of Nations was formed, stood at the United Nations and scolded them and told them what a horrible job they're doing. What has the UN done to get Russia to stop war with Ukraine? Nothing. Nothing. And what have they done to rein in China? And they still have China and Russia on the Security Council. What a joke. And the United Nations was set to create world peace. They've been part of creating wars and wars. And so, yes, they need to be removed from New York and from America. And America, United States, should get out of the United Nations, which has been counterproductive to American sovereignty.
I know that your organization works hard to support President Trump and his goals and all that he has in mind to accomplish during his administration. What are the top two things that you consider you all can be productive and helpful with?
Well, as I said, deportation, but it includes anything of national concern. One thing that we started with at the very beginning is that we should all be working with other agencies, but the state and federal agencies should be put on notice that their powers are extremely limited. According to the Supreme Court case here that everyone should have, that the federal government was only granted discrete and enumerated powers. That's on page 7. Only the whole purpose of the Constitution was to keep government limited and off the backs of the people. And what we want to make sure that they remember, they were only delegated by the states, by the way. The states form the federal government, not the other way around. But they only have 5 law enforcement powers, and we want them to know that. And so we trained all law enforcement in America about that, and sheriffs, that they need to know and understand that the federal government only has 5 law enforcement powers. And yes, they do own those. But anything to the 10th Amendment outside those powers belongs to the states, belongs to the sheriffs, belongs to the people. So the 5 law enforcement powers that the federal government has are treason, felonies committed on the high seas or piracies, counterfeiting. Article 4, Section 4 says they are to protect our borders from invasion. That's law enforcement. And 5, violations of treaties. Anything else? The states and the sheriffs and the counties take care of all of that.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I think it only makes sense. You cannot know necessarily in Washington, D.C., what needs to be happening in some little border town like Laredo or El Paso, Texas, or one of your Arizona border
Graham
towns.
County, Arizona, wherever their sheriff. It was Graham County is only 90 miles from the border. And they don't know what we need in here. And copper, cattle, and cotton are big-time industries for us. And we don't think that the USDA or the FDA should be running those from Washington, D.C. And that's absurd. They should not.
One thing that I would also like to ask your thoughts on is term limits. How do you feel about that and why?
Well, everyone in Washington, D.C. should have term limits. The state's the same. I don't know if sheriffs should only stay in 8 years. I only stayed in 8 years, but I wanted to stay in longer. I don't think the sheriff is the same as some of these career politicians. He's a career lawman. I was hoping to stay in 12, maybe even 16 years, but I lost my 3rd election. And that's probably the best term limits we have, is that the people should be in charge of keeping the sheriff however long they want. But there are term limits for sheriffs in many states, and I'm not against those, because overall, I'm very, very much in favor of term limits. Washington, D.C. is being completely destroyed by corruption and corrupt politicians that are career politicians, And once you get ingrained, it just seems it's impossible to get them out. And so I'm totally in favor of term limits, especially for corrupt politicians in Washington, D.C.
Totally agree with you on that. That's one of those hot potatoes that a lot of people don't want to discuss and decline to answer, but I'm glad that we're on the same page with that. So, what are some things that you would like to highlight as we come toward the end of our time today? One of the things that I personally want to point out is the amazing wealth of information that's available on your website, which is shown in the comment section and the title section with this podcast. Would you like to highlight any particular areas that you feel are of most value?
Yeah, I would say the one about people joining our posse, the CSPOA posse. It's right there on the front page. And everyone should be looking at the dearth and non-existence of peaceful and effective solutions. The CSPOA is leading the country in that regard. We believe that all law enforcement should be protecting civil rights and that everyone should be trained how to do that. We also believe that the American people should be engaged with their sheriff and volunteer to work with him on his posse, help him form a posse if he doesn't have one. That's where we offer that training to you. The CSPOA exists for the American people, and that is that you must be involved in the freedom process. Jefferson warned us that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. He was talking to us, the first 3 words of the Constitution. We, the people, we have to be involved in the process, and we offer you that opportunity on a silver platter to be involved with the holy cause of liberty, as Patrick Henry called it. So go to our website, cspoa.org, and check out being a member of the CSPOA posse so we can train you how to work with your sheriff and his posse. And it is $11 a month. And if there's no contract, if you don't think we're doing what we're supposed to be doing or what we promised you that we would be doing, you can quit anytime you want. But we're certain that you'll want to stay on. You could also do it even cheaper and do it $99 a year. This blesses us both. You help us stay funded, you help us stay in the fight, and we help you work with local officials, especially your sheriff, to take back America, county by county and state by state.
Thank you very much for that. We all should join that and support you because what you're doing is much needed in America. So thank you for all that you're doing. And the least we can do is to support that effort. We thank you so much for coming on with us today. You have been a wealth of information. I thank you. Hopefully down the road, we will have you back for updates.
Well, I would love that. And thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Are you ready to stand up for your community and support your local sheriff? Join the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association and become a vital member of the Sheriff's Citizens Posse. At cspoa.org, we empower citizens like you through weekly webinars, arming you with the knowledge to back your constitutional county sheriff. Together, we can uphold our Constitution and ensure liberty and justice for all. Your community needs you now more than ever. Visit cspoa.org and join the Sheriff's Citizens Posse today. Make a difference. Stand for freedom. That's cspoa.org. Your country, your fight, your future.
Thanks for watching the Awake to Truth podcast. Visit our website at awaketotruth.org and connect with Mary Starr on X at @awaketotruth_ and on Rumble at Awake to Truth Ministries. The Awake to Truth podcast, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded by shadows.